Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Chris Dion, and today we'll be doing a Kobiton and Katalon, demonstration for you all. With me, I am joined by Brad Goldstein. Brad, if you want to introduce yourself quickly.
Yep, I'm Brad Goldstein, as Chris mentioned. I head up our client success team here at Kobiton. I also work with our technical partners. So I'm excited to show you all kind of what we got.
Perfect. Again, my name is Chris Dion. I'm a solution engineer here at Katalon, so very much familiar with working with the technical side of things. So if you have any questions, both Brad and I will be able, as well as, we are also joined by Adam as well from the Kobiton side, who will be answering and kind of being managing the Q&A session as well. All three of us will be able to kind of address all of your technical questions or general questions about Katalon and Kobiton over this presentation. So a couple of things about today's conversation. It's all about the integration with mobile testing, along with a end-to-end perspective that Katalon and Kobiton can provide you. For right now, we have a few slides that we're going to be having. I would say for right now, refrain from asking questions until we enter in our Q&A sessions, so that it's just easier to manage what those questions are going to be like. But again, once we enter that session, by all means, ask away. Also, towards the end of our demonstration and webinar, there will also be a poll. If you would be so kind to fill that out towards the as well. It's just a simple few questions. That'll be much appreciated for us as well. Okay, so with that being said, we will just kindly go through a few slides, and then we will go into the demonstration, starting off with Kobiton's side of things, and then transitioning from taking those that mobile lab that they create and utilizing it for our automation test scripts. So with that being said, a couple of things. I'm just going to have to move a few details away so I can actually show the slide. So a few things that we're going to be talking about is the actual obstacles that you see in the test automation environment. First off, the main thing is we want more time. Right? Q&A have always been the place where time is of the essence of sorts. So having increased agility to actually make changes to your application or tests, being able to adequately do cross-platform testing as well, and eliminating bottlenecks. These bottlenecks can come into play in multiple ways. For automation, the biggest one is the fact that maintenance is going to come into to the actual test automation. So whenever you create a test script, you're going to have to maintain it and also be able to make sure that it runs against multiple versions of your application, specifically if that application was to be modified in any sort of way. Brad, do you have any bottlenecks that you're aware of from a mobile app perspective that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, from a mobile perspective, a lot of the bottlenecks come from deployment options. So really restricting kind of how you deploy your devices. So whether that's public, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper in the coming slides, but overall, mobile is really difficult. There's new versions that are released kind of on a weekly basis, a monthly basis. There's upgrades that always happen. And ultimately, everybody needs to test those versions. That's one of the biggest bottlenecks people come to us for is, hey, how do we keep these up to date? How do we test all these different versions? And then, hey, I just got a support ticket or a bug on a specific device. So how do we now pivot and go test those devices instead of the standard devices that we typically test?
Mm-hmm. Perfect. A couple of other ones from a Katalon platform perspective is, with a successful automation environment, whether that be through mobile or any of the other platforms that we cover, we also have a number of bottlenecks goes into test coverage as well. Not only is that impacted by maintenance, but also by having visibility into your quality assurance as well, and having a holistic view of what the actual quality is at a given time. So a few things about us. Again, I'll let Brad and I discuss this. First, we'll kind of go over the Katalon platform overview, and then Brad will be discussing the Kobiton overview as well. So Katalon, first off, is regarded as a very highly rated product. This is not just something that is a one-off thing in one site. This is given to us in multiple areas, given by Capterra, Gartner, and a few others. The information that you see here, 850,000 testers and developers onboarded, 100,000 companies that trust us with the quality assurance. All of this information is growing in a very increasingly fast pace. So again, you may recognize, may remember these numbers. And if you do, just understand it's probably bigger than what it was before. So the companies and the people that trust us do have that trust with us because we have an end-to-end perspective in regards to how we impact your development lifecycle, your development lifecycle. And that's mostly not just with tech companies, but that is with, companies of various industries as well. And with that being said, I'll pass it on to Brad to kind of go over the Kobiton side of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'd really like to focus on for this slide is tell you a little bit about why Katalon and Kobiton make sense together, and kind of a little bit about our lineage. So both companies were created by a services company called KMS Technologies. KMS Technologies has also created Q-Test. So Q-Test was QA Symphony in the past. It is now a Tricentis product. So we have the same founders as Q-Test with Kobiton and Katalon. And we're all separate companies now, but again, the same lineage. So really successful at creating DevOps tools for their clients. So we were founded in 2016 in Atlanta. We have close to 160 people as employees across the world. And we're trusted by very large companies, financial institutions, gaming, and basically anyone under the sun who care about speed and performance, really thrive towards Kobiton.
So with that being said, I do have a slide for Katalon. Kobiton, is a mobile lab and it provides you those services. Katalon has a kind of a cross-platform, overview, and we actually provide many solutions in our portfolios. And what we are going to show you and demonstrate you for today is predominantly our Katalon Studio product, which is all about creating test cases. And then we will also be talking about test ops, which is what is going to be orchestrating our test executions, managing our test results, and actually going into some quality insights. As you can see in this diagram, there are two other solutions in our portfolio, Test Cloud and Runtime Engine. These are solutions that are focusing on test execution. So if there's, during our discussion about test ops, mostly if you are wanting to do remote execution, whether that be on a on-prem or virtualized environment, we will provide those execution engines through those two products. But as you can see here in the bottom left, Kobiton is going to take a major part into today's demonstration when it comes to test creation and also when it comes to test execution, which we will be going over those integration points and how we install them into our environments during today's discussion. Brad, do you want to add anything on your end on this slide?
Yeah, nothing from my end other than, Kobiton is ultimately going to be the device lab for Katalon. So Katalon's an amazing tool for authoring and managing all of your tests. And even with Test Cloud, it becoming another execution engine for web browser, and then utilizing and leveraging Kobiton for the execution of mobile.
Absolutely. So with that being said, let's just jump right into a demonstration. Brad, I'll let you first start off with the Kobiton, and then we'll trade off once we have an established understanding of those public and local devices.
Absolutely. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Kobiton as kind of a whole. I really want to focus on where we fit with Katalon, but I definitely want to make sure we touch on kind of everything that we do. So right now, when you log into the portal, this is the screen that you see. These are our public devices. So at any given time, there's somewhere between 200 and 300 available devices. As we mentioned earlier, mobile is really hard. So keeping up with mobile devices is really difficult and cumbersome for companies to do. We make that easy. We take that from you all and we solve that problem. So again, you can see down here, we have all sorts of iOS devices. Some are being utilized. So this is a shared pool of devices, these public devices. And then you can filter by what's being utilized, what's available, and call certain devices. Again, you can look at different OS versions. So iOS 15, we already have those out here. And we keep up with the latest versions. I think 15.5 was just released. We have 15.4 right now. 15.5 will be on the platform in the next couple of weeks since it was just released last week. Again, you can filter for Android as well. Similar stature here is that we have Android 12s. We keep up with the latest and greatest, but if you also go all the way down and filter, you can also see some fairly older versions here as well for clients who need that. So our deployment options are vast. So you're able to kind of do whatever you guys want to do. So if you have devices laying around, and you say, hey, we want you to manage these devices, you send those devices to us and we will manage those devices. We take kind of the guesswork out of managing devices for you all. So right now you're looking at private devices. These are dedicated devices just for your team. And I'm still sorted. So you can see I have iPhones and iOS devices here. But again, you can look at this on a team basis. So you can filter this by team, but realistically, we're going to focus on just what this actually means. So you can spin up a local lab. So in your office today, you can say, hey, I just want to spin up the 10 devices that I have. You can get a Mac machine, a hub, and you can hook those devices up right now and start utilizing them globally. And that's one of the big problems that we solve is that COVID hit, no one's in the office anymore. You can't have these traditional device labs where people go in and play with devices. Instead, a lot of people are shipping devices globally, losing those devices or they're breaking. And it's a cumbersome process. You have to keep buying those devices and sending them out. It's really difficult. So that's the local option. The private option is we manage everything for you. So we'll do everything from purchasing the devices to the iOS certificates to managing the full end-to-end ability of managing your device lab for just your devices. And the fourth option for us is on-premise. So we do work with, I think we mentioned earlier, a lot of financial services companies, a lot of gaming companies, and they really care about their privacy. They care about their security, and they really want to be behind the firewall. So we have the ability to launch on-premise, and that's another thing. That'll be a full setup on-premise. What that looks like is an actual cart that we ship to you all. And again, you can still leverage the Katalon offering here. So there's a couple other pieces that we do offer for mobile specific. One is scriptless automation. Two are visual and performance testing metrics, as well as the visual testing piece and accessibility testing. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about that stuff. But overall, we funnel into the device lab piece for Katalon. And Chris, I'll kick it back to you.
Thanks, Brad. So let me share my screen once again. A couple of things that we want to take place, once we have an understanding of Kobiton, I do now want to show you guys how we actually, set up that integration. This way, you don't go with you don't have a simple just understanding of what we can do with the integration. You can actually lead today and do it on your own instance of Kobiton and Katalon if you have those tools already installed. So a couple of things that you'll need for this integration point. You need to go inside the Katalon store and you will need to be installing this Kobiton integration. Again, you simply need to type in Katalon store Kobiton integration in a plugin and you'll be able to download it. From here, you're going to need a couple of key points of information. Once this is installed, you will need to go into your Katalon instance, which is what we'll be showcasing right now. Inside the Katalon instance, you will then need to go into your plugins. Simply install the plugin. Once the plugin is installed, you will then have to reload it, which is inside of your profile picture. Once you reload the plugin, you'll be able to access these devices. And when you go into the recorder, you'll be able to select the Kobiton devices. Now, there is another step, which is how to actually connect your Kobiton instance to your Katalon instance as well. That is done simply by going into the project settings, going inside the plugins. My apologies, it's not inside the plugins. It would be within your tools. And you'll be able to actually import your user credentials as well. Another key point of information that you'll need, and I will switch back to my instance of Kobiton, is that within your Kobiton instance, you will need the API key. I'm not going to be sharing that information right now, but just understand that if you were to go in your profile settings, and if you were to select or go under the setting tabs, your API key will be the first tab open. Simply copy and paste that and put that in with your credentials, and you'll be able to access all the devices inside of your Kobiton instance. Now, the devices that you will see inside of your Katalon instance is going to be based off of your favorites list. So right now, as you can see, my favorite list is going to be made up of mostly Android devices, because the application that we're going to be testing under is an Android device itself. Another thing that will be pertinent for test ops integration is taking in this user device ID. Simply copy and paste this, and we'll utilize that a little bit later on when we start talking about remote execution and schedule execution within test ops. All right, so now let's actually go into Katalon itself. So when we are going into Katalon and we want to create a test script against one of these actual devices inside of Kobiton, all we need to do is go into our recorder, go into the drop-down menu and select the Kobiton devices. And from here, it's actually pulling in the information for all the devices, as well as the application files that we have. The application files are actually stored inside of Kobiton. All you need to do is simply upload the APK or IPA, depending on what device, iOS or Android, and you'll be able to select them from a drop-down list right here. So as you can see, I have a number of APKs already installed, as well as a few IPAs as well. Again, those favorited devices that I have inside of Kobiton are listed out in front of here. Again, all of them are Android devices, but it's just a selection so that we can actually choose from any of them. For today, I'm just going to go off the Nexus, and I'm going to be selecting off of our Android API demo application. And from here, we're going to simply start it. From what is happening right now is that we are sending the information over to Kobiton to say, hey, launch this specific device with this specific application file. And we're going to then, be able to see that device in front of us. It does take a few seconds, just connect and install the application. But once that's done, we'll then see the device view show us a live image of what that device actually is showing on from a Kobiton side. And we'll be able to interact and create a test script based off of it. Once it is done installing, we can then create our test case. A couple of things that we can actually go into a little bit more detail is that the only difference from a Katalon Studio and a test creation side is that if you were to have the skill sets to create a mobile test case, parameterizing it, maintaining it, and in general, just kind of execute the test cases, all those skill sets are the same across all of our different other platforms. So there's no different way of parameterizing a web test case versus a mobile or against a API or a desktop. It's all done foundationally the same. Specifically for UI applications, we will be focusing on the recorder, which is the main difference that you see in your test recording sessions. Again, that was a little bit slow, but that's only because of my internet connection, probably coming in and interrupting our session. But as you can see here, we do have our device view showing us the real or the live view of what our device is showing at the time. In the middle section, we do have a all object view, which is essentially us scraping the objects that Katalon can identify in that device view, and that we can just click on any one of these and be able to identify said object so that we can actually then tie an action to. Speaking of actions, those actions are actually listed here in the top section, where we can actually give certain things like tap, swipe, set text, get text, etc. And when we interact and actually tie objects to actions, those items will be then listed into our test scripts, which is listed here in the bottom section. So let's actually just create, a simple way of going through our application. I'm just going to be traversing through it simply by, tapping certain objects. This will be then executing the actual command. And as you can see, we're able to traverse our application. Our object view is then updated, and we will then be able to continue on with the test case. And this is pretty much how you will be interacting with it for the most part, being able to get from point A to point B. Now, there are some points where we actually may want to showcase a few things, like, let's just wind this a little bit, like interacting with certain different UIs, not simply just buttons, but maybe we want to toggle on checkboxes, or we want to then go into maybe swiping certain switches. These are all things that we can actually start interacting with. And again, as you see here, we're able to identify them both in the device view as well in the object view. But going from point A to point B is simple, right? The next step is probably, how do I get information out of my actual test script? In which case, we can do a number of things. We can actually start going into, let's go back a little bit. And let's validate one of these things. Let's go into preferences for XML. From here, all we're going to be doing is we're going to get some information, let's say, to see if this is actually checked or not. What we can do is we can start off by, first off tapping it, or we can start by getting some text. Now, get text can be a wide range of different ways of doing this. Simply put, we can just verify if it's checked or not, but I need to click on the right object for that, let's just say, and I want to, get that information. So I can say, once I click on some key point of view, it will fill it in for me. I simply apply that action. And now what I can do is that in the script view, I can then change and utilize that piece of information for later on. Other things that we can do, we can obviously take screenshots to verify if we're in the actual proper part of the application. And not only that, but we can also then verify if that information is accurate through our visual testing capabilities within test hubs. Okay. Again, pretty straightforward. You can be able to get information, set information if we were to have like a text box or anything like that. But the main thing is that we're able to verify some key points of our application. Once we have our script already done and created, we can then save it. I already do have a script saved, so we're just going to cancel it for now. And you'll start seeing our script listed here in our manual view. This manual view is just one of two perspectives that you can be given. Another thing about Katalon Studio is that this is not just a non-technical solution or a very technical solution. This is a place where both people of various skill sets can actually work together and start creating these test cases utilizing the same test assets. So you won't have to rewrite the same test case twice, just so that your developers can be more shift left focused and your QA team can be more, test coverage. If you were wanting to switch to views, all you need to do is simply select the script view. And here you'll have our Groovy-based language, shown in front of you. Groovy, again, is a flavor of Java. So if you're familiar with object-oriented programming, chances are you'll be very comfortable with the syntax shown here. And again, the code is pretty straightforward. For the most part, we're just simply finding an object and we're giving it an action. Most of it being taps. We can obviously go into pressbacks, get text, etc. If we were wanting to go back into our manual view and change any of these steps, maybe it's not tap, maybe I want to verify or anything of that nature, I can then go here and actually start utilizing a number of different actions. Again, one of the main ones is that we can actually start doing some verify elements. A lot of them are just different flavors of the same thing, which is like we can verify if the element exists, if it doesn't exist, if we're able to see it, if it's actually, verify some text that we were based off of. So if you want to, just set up a bookmark in that recording session, like I did with the get text, we can just simply replace that get text action with the verify element, and we can just verify the element based off of a number of different criteria. Okay. Now, a couple of other things, just to kind of bring you up to speed, is that when we interact with all of these UI elements, they are stored in something of an object repository. Object repositories, for those who don't know, is simply a central location for all of your references. So these are not just a reference to one mobile test case, but to any test case that we actually start utilizing those buttons or those UI elements, checkboxes, text fields, etc. And if we were to maintain these objects inside of our object repository, we are having a one-to-many impact. For instance, right? Let's say this OK button that we clicked on at some point during our test case was utilized in 7 or 8 different test cases. I don't have to modify seven iterations of that OK button. I can just simply go inside of here, open it up, and I can modify the way that we locate that object inside of this one instance, and that instance will then be updated for all test cases using it as a reference. Okay. Speaking of which, what you are seeing right now is inside of the way that we identify certain objects inside of our test case. Right now it is incorporating attributes, but there is a number of ways that we can actually start identifying it as well. So if you're familiar with XPath, or if you're familiar with any of the other criteria of ways or locator strategies that we call them, you can easily start incorporating those as well. But for right now, we're going to just simply use the attributes, and we are going to then look into the object properties. The attributes, again, is just a list of properties that we were able to scrape when we were recording, and now we are able to uniquely identify it through a number of checkboxes. So as you can see here, we are utilizing the class, the text, the resource ID as a key identifier. But if we were wanting to change that, all we need to do is simply select or deselect a given text box. And that locator will change and reflect that as such. Okay, so once this is all established, we can go into actually running our test case. But for the sake of time, I don't want to, take too much time and wait for a test case to run. We can actually start saving the results or adding these test cases into what is called a test suite. Now, a test suite is simple, is just a collection of test cases, but there is a wide range of different types of test suites that we can actually incorporate. So test suites are simple collection of test cases. These can be organized in such a way that we can target specific features and start having things like the login test suite, where we start having, maybe a happy path test case, a failed login test case, etc. But also we can actually start incorporating something called a test suite collection. This could be something as a regression testing test suite collection, which is simply a collecting of other test suites so that you can actually start executing them either sequentially or in parallel with each other. And then lastly, what we have is the dynamic test suites. Dynamic test suites are a new addition to 8.3 of Katalon Studios. What that is that if we were to create a new test case, let's just do that to show you, we have the ability of adding tags. So if you're wanting to incorporate let's say this mobile test case, and it goes through the preferences. You can add a preference tag. Or if you want to add preference tags to, say, I don't know, happy path, you can incorporate that as well. And what you're doing is that you're labeling these test cases in such a way that if you were to then go into a dynamic test suite, you can then pull all of the test cases based off of these tags. So you can start saying, I want to make this dynamic test suite run all of the happy path, all of the all the test cases that are associated to the login. And you can actually start having this automatically accumulation and cultivation of all these test cases, so that you don't really have to go through, I know it's only one test case here, but in an actual working environment, you're probably going to be, meddling with at least 50 plus, 100 plus, 200 plus test cases for some time. And in which case you don't want to go through every single one of them and try to figure out what are they trying to do and what they associate with. Instead, you can actually start using tags as a quick shorthand way of actually saying, I just want to run everything associated to this specific environment. Okay. So once we have all this set up, let's create a test suite actually, just to show you what it looks like. We're just going to call it mobile suite. We can give it a description if we want. But once we add this, this is pretty much what it's going to be. All I need to do is add a test case, click it, and that's it. That is one test case added to our test suite. And from here, we can do a number of different things. We can start off by parameterizing it, which for today's demonstration we won't go too much into, but just understand what we're going to be capable of is create something of variables. These variables are created inside the test cases and tie them to specific parts of our test case, either as inputs or as outputs, or just in general, being able to associate them as parameters for certain function calls. But not only that, but we're able to also tie in data files, which will be shown here in the test area, and we'll start tying them to each other. These data files can widely range from Excel sheets to internal files to even database connections. Another thing is that if you're wanting to have more of a test-driven test case with external data, easily can be incorporated through Katalon Studio. For the database specifically, we support a lot of SQL-like servers. So if you're wanting to pull some information from SQL Server or anything of that like, what you'll be able to do is actually start incorporating your connection to that said database, and you can start pulling in information and treat it much like you would treat an Excel sheet. Once done, you can then start going into a number of things. But for today, we're just going to be focusing on, this mobile test case. So we added our test case. We can then run it. Those results will then be fed back into our test op instance. And from there, we can transition to our test op tool, which we will go in here. That's a little bit early for that. So here we have our other solution in our platform, and that is test ops. Now, test ops is all about orchestration, quality insight, and start being accumulation of all your test results that you have from your test execution. With that information, we can do a number of things. We can actually start doing a end-to-end perspective of our actual testing efforts, start focusing and answering some in-depth questions that you may not be able to answer without having some aggregating tool to actually start creating this test data for you. In which case we can start focusing on profile coverage, executional trends, how well we're actually covering all of our platforms. And all these questions are being answered because we're able to take in all that results and file them accordingly. And all of this configuration is done automatically and done out of the box. So you don't have to worry about tying certain data points to certain fields. Katalon Studio and Test Ops Communication does that for you. So for one of the overviews that I like to kind of showcase is the execution trend. Again, this is a great tool for stand-up meetings in general, which is how well are we actually executing? What you see in front of you right now is not a typical chart that you want to see in your automation environment. Usually what you want to see is a steady increase in test cases being executed over the course of time rather than an inconsistent one. But then again, this is a demonstration environment. Stuff happens like that. But what you want to see is you want to see that nice increase of execution, but also you want to start seeing an increase of that ratio of pass-fail. So as you increase that, you want to make sure that all of those, you're not just adding more failures to it, but even if you are, you want to make sure that you are able to address them in a timely fashion. And you can start seeing that trajectory shown here. Once you have an understanding of a kind of a broader view of what your testing looks like, let's drill down into the actual test suites and test runs that we are able to execute simply by going into our test run subsection. Here we can actually start seeing a lot of the test results being executed. Again, we're just seeing in the past week, but we can also pull information from like 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago. Again, really kind of enabling you to live into that agile 2-week cycle, but also kind of give you enough information to kind of reflect on how well you've been able to do some testing in that time frame. As you can see here in the bottom section, we can see our most recently executed test runs, as well as some of the results associated to them. Again, test runs are based off of multiple things. They can be based off of test suites, executing multiple iterations of those test suites into different environments, and with each iteration of those can add to a total number that you've seen here. So this login scenario was executed on Linux Chrome, and it took about 35 seconds to execute. It was done 5 hours ago. There was 4 test suites associated to it, and we were then able to, or there are 4 test cases, my apologies, and 3 of them passed and 1 of them failed. If we wanted to learn more information about this specific one, we can actually then go down and select by the ID. And if we wanted to, we can go down further. However, before we do that, I do want to go based off of test results. This is essentially looking at the execution of certain test runs or test suites, and we are going to see the general performance of them. Again, as you can see, our graph shows us not only pass fails, but also errors as well. Errors are often referred to as, pipeline configurations or general, missing assets, things that just made the test case not able to kick off in the first place. So if there was one thing worse than a failed test case, which gives you a visibility, it's the fact that you have a test asset or test case or a test suite that's just not able to run at all, which means that you just have no visibility about it whatsoever. So let's actually start looking through a couple of these test suites and start finding out which one of these are, giving us a problem. So if we were to select one in specifically, like the logout, we can start seeing the execution of it. All green, so no big deal. We can go on to the next one, go into the login story. We can go in here and start seeing a few things. Let's see what it is for right now. Up the information. Let's probably go into another one, see if that refreshes and makes it a little bit faster. Okay, so as we can see here, we just went into another one. This one's for candid snapshots. And as we can see here, we have a number of executions shown that these are all errors, and they're all giving us, no visibility in regards to that one specific feature and capability that this test suite is actually targeting towards. In this case, we have 12, 14, 2. So we have about 28 test suites that weren't able to run over the course of a couple of months. So obviously this is something that we want to address so that the next time this is actually being executed, we get visibility in what this test case actually is. If we were to go down a little bit further, now that we've found our problem, we can start seeing when that execution was taking place and seeing if there was any failed test cases at all. From here, we can actually go down even further, instead of going into the overview or the test run and test suite perspective, let's go down a level of granularity with the test cases themselves. The test cases themselves have, again, we're just able to verify based off of the executions. But if we want to, look for specifically when that view candidate shot was shown, we can filter through this process. But let's select just the first one that gave us an error, just to show you guys what it looks like from a defect perspective. Here we can actually start answering a couple of things. First off, performance. Performance is a good indicator for a number of things. First off, maintenance. Something that we didn't go into during our studio perspective, but we have this thing called self-healing insight. What it is going to be able to do is that if there's a problem that happens on execution, Katalon Studios will come into play and start fixing the identification of objects, just so that you don't have to do it yourself at the end of when you see these test results. It's just another way that we give time back to the users so that they can actually start working on increasing test coverage rather than maintaining these test cases. One of the good indicators of that is that if there's a spike in performance, so if we see here that there's a pretty steady 13-12 seconds execution, but let's say this takes self-healing insight was invoked, that would probably add another 15-30 seconds, and that spike will be very noticeable. So that's probably a good sign for us to actually start going back and modifying our test cases. If we go down a little bit further, we can start seeing the actual results themselves. And in this case, if we wanted to look into the actual defect report, we can actually start seeing a couple of things. For those users on this call or in this webinar, we do have the ability of integrating with a number of lifecycle management tools. As you can see here, we have Jira already integrated. Jira is able to not only pull defects, but we're able to create defects inside of test ops and then send that information over to your instance, where you can actually start having your defect management done in that fashion. From there, we also be able to pull the requirements as well from Jira, and we'll be able to create this traceability matrix, right? So for those who are familiar with them or not familiar with them, traceability matrices are allowing us to take a defect, tying it to a test result, which is tied to a test case, which is tied to a test suite, which is tied to a specific feature that you're actually, or requirement that you're actually working on, which is then tied to a release. So having the ability of knowing what impact and what actual test cases have what impact on your requirements from a business analyst perspective is a very powerful tool, especially when you want to be aggressive and be proactive and actually seeing what your test cases are going to look like in the next iteration of development. Outside of having that traceability and defect management, we actually have a summary of what that error is. In this case, it just looks like the object that we were referencing was just not able to identify. If we were to take any screenshots or anything during our test case executions, again, this is something that can be easily done through our mobile recording sessions by just selecting the screenshot action. We will see those screenshots listed here. And if we go down even further, we now have a full error log showcasing us what is actually going on. So what we were able to do within test ops is kind of have a good broad view of what our application is able to look like from a quality standard. And then we were then able to narrow it down to the individual test suites to even the lowest level of granularity, which is the test cases themselves and the defects associated to them. That is a way that we can actually start talking about management and reporting. But let's start talking about another key part of today's discussion, remote execution, right? So what we have here is the ability of scheduling these test suites to execute in a specific interval. And those intervals can be done not only for our platforms like our web and desktop, but for today's discussion, we can also do it for our Kobiton devices as well. So to do that, we simply need to schedule the test run, and we can do a couple of things. First off, we answer 3 questions: the what, where, and when. The what being what test cases are we executing? In which case, what we need to do that is simply say, I want to execute this test case within AWS or some code script repository that we have stored for us. Saving a script repository is pretty straightforward. Simply put, you put it into a repository. In this case, we support Git, but if you have GitLab or any of the other, majorly used repositories, we support that as well. And you'll make a reference to that inside of here so that we can actually start sending that test cases to the targeted environment that we're trying to execute on. Then from there, we want to then say, do we want to execute this within Test Cloud or a local environment? Local environment will be specifically for our KRE licenses. Again, that is our executional engine, but Test Cloud is our SaaS-based execution engine as well, both of which, you can make your choice of architectural options from there. But once we answer the what and where, we can then answer the when. When is this actually going to be executed? Well, for this time, we just simply say, I want to execute it between now and, 1 week from now, 2 weeks from now, 5 months from now, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. Essentially, you can establish the time frame that you want. And you can say what intervals that you want it to be executed on. Do I want this to execute once every week? Do I want to execute it once every day, once every hour, once every minute? It's allowing you to actually start having that scheduling capabilities in a very straightforward fashion. But specifically towards our Kobiton instance, we can go into our advanced settings. And once we have our integrations actually created, we actually will then be able to input our Kobiton devices ID. Again, just as a refresher from previously in our discussion, the device ID is this ID right here. So simply put, if I want to use the Galaxy Note 20, all I need to do is copy this ID, and I need to then input that ID inside here. Not only will I be able to set that up, but I also will be able to set up if I wanted to do, if we were to do a test suite collection, if I want to do it sequentially, or if I want to do parallel execution. But that's for web applications, not so much for mobile. For mobile, we will only be doing it on one device. And again, once we have that all established, we can just go back and hit the schedule button, and we will then have no worry whatsoever to the actual execution of this to this test suite being executed on a specific device. Again, we can utilize that and start executing it. If we wanted to add multiple scheduled test runs and just simply change them on different platforms, we can do that as well. But it's a pretty straightforward no code, low code perspective of configuration. Now, I would assume that at least a few of you on this webinar have questions in regards to integrations to CI/CD pipelines. So for those who are incorporating Jenkins, what you will be able to do is be able to simply refer to these test runs, and you can actually start having these test runs being kicked off based off of a Jenkins pipeline trigger. So what it is that Jenkins will be sending the simple, hey, run this test run that we just scheduled. And if it's a mobile device targeting a specific Kobiton device like we just configured, it'll then kick off from there. For those who are utilizing other CI/CD pipelines, maybe like Azure or through TeamCity or some sorts, most likely will be the case is that you'll be creating a YAML file or modifying a YAML file to actually start targeting test ops and running those test cases through more of a command line perspective. But we can go into that a little bit later on if anybody has any questions during the Q&A. And that is our demonstration for us. Again, we were able to accomplish quite a bit today. We were able to take the mobile app provided us by Kobiton. We were able to then pull that devices and application inside of Katalon Studio, record based off of it, if we were to showcase, parameterization, we were able to then show you how those test results can be fed back into test ops, and how having an aggregated amount of or cultivated amount of test results can give us insights in answering more broader, more project important, questions. Not only that, but we also show you how we can start doing some remote execution for these mobile testing or mobile test cases, so that you can actually start, not having to hit the play button all the time. You can kind of have an assurance that these test cases will be executing at a specific interval that you've established. So with that being said, let us, I'll just simply click this on one more. We can go into the Q&A. So Adam, do you have any questions that were already asked, or anything that was of that nature?
Yeah, so we've been answering some through text as they've been coming through, but I do have some here that we could answer live. And again, if there's additional questions, please throw them into that Q&A pane. The first one, Brad, you touched on this before we jumped into the demo, but what is the difference between Katalon's Test Cloud and the Kobiton platform?
Yep. So the Kobiton platform is mobile only. We want to be the best in mobile. Again, I think we talked earlier about bottlenecks in mobile specifically, and we recognize that mobile is really hard. And so mobile being really hard means versions are updated all the time, new devices are released all the time. So having to keep up with that is really difficult. So for us, we are fully focused on the mobile realm, and then Test Cloud is fully focused on browser testing or cross-browser testing or web testing. So, and I'll let Chris speak to that if I misspoke or anything there.
No, absolutely on the money. Again, we kind of recognize, and again, Test Cloud will have future collaborations with Kobiton in offering this as well. That's more of kind of a sneak peek in the roadmap discussion. But we have a close relationship with each other, so we recognize the power and capability that Kobiton provides us with the mobile lab capabilities, and Test Cloud will be able to fill in the gaps of the rest, right? So Kobiton will be the excellence in mobile, while we provide you guys the excellence in regards to web applications or web execution.
Excellent. All right, we have another one here. So how can I run tests in multiple browsers or across multiple devices?
So across multiple devices, that will be something that we can configure through multiple scheduled test runs. If we were to go back into our instance of Katalon into test ops, we scheduled a test run for one device against one specific environment. Now, if we wanted to do it against multiple devices, we would be able to schedule multiple test runs. For web applications, that would be something done through our test suite collections. So here we have a single test case or test suite that we are referencing to, and we are going to select the test suite collection. Not only that, but I'm going to select the local environments. And so what we're going to be doing from here is simply selecting, actually, let me go over here. We'll be selecting multiple different environments. There we go. Instead of the Chrome, we'll be selecting multiple different environments and selecting the actual executions of Windows and Chrome and Linux and Safari, etc. And those options will be listed out below from here.
Excellent. We had another question which I can answer actually. Will this webinar be recorded and shared afterwards? Yes. The recording will be sent after this, so you'll be able to watch it again and take a look back. We had another question. I think this one might be for you, Chris. Is the scheduled test run, does it only need a KRE license?
So scheduled test runs need a couple of things. For executions, remote executions, and incorporating it through your CI/CD pipeline, you will need test ops and you'll need carry. For executions with Kobiton, that is a good question. I don't have the answer off the top of my head. I can easily search for that while we do while someone answers another question. So I will get you that answer real quick.
Excellent. While you do that, I guess I'll throw one at Brad then. So, Brad, I know both of these platforms we've mentioned a couple times, they work really well together, but I guess from a testing standpoint in general, are there any solutions or tips that you have to help reduce test execution time in either of the platforms?
Yeah, I mean, overall, if you're authoring all of your tests in Katalon already and potentially, utilizing their browser solution, there's almost there's no reason to author them anywhere else. There's no reason to use another tool in another platform. Again, this approach is taking a one platform approach. So making sure that it's fully integrated and not kind of leaving the different areas to go to different tools and all of that is super beneficial. And we definitely recognize that. There's also in Kobiton specifically, we built for automation. If you guys are using Appium, we built we built an execution engine called Appium. You run your standard Appium script, but we run it 3 times faster. So that's a way to kind of speed up on the Kobiton side, the mobile only. But again, this is really talking about the one platform approach and authoring everything in Katalon.
Excellent. There's another question that came through that says, with test ops, can we integrate just like Jira?
Interesting question. What does it mean by integrate just like Jira? Whoever asked that, if you could kind of share a little bit more information on that, would be greatly appreciated.
Cool. While we wait for that.
I do have an answer to that previous question on the licenses for carries and test for the Kobiton execution. Yes, if you're going to do a mobile test execution through test ops and you have a scheduled test run and you have targeted against a Kobiton instance, you will be needing a carry license. So,
right. There's actually a related question here also. It says, does it require node lock or a floating license for KRE?
Node lock is not required. Floating licenses for what exactly is probably my other question for that. Just to answer the required licenses, we'll just kind of go through the whole entire thing. If you're wanting to execute anything from test ops, right, and you're wanting to do a remote execution, you have 2 options. You have first one, Test Cloud for web applications. Soon to be, future test case, you'll need a Test Cloud. But then if you want to incorporate KRE on your on-prem machines, you'll need to incorporate that as well. KRE licenses will be required if you're wanting to do any of our test executions on a remote machine. So you'll need 3 things if you're wanting to do remote execution and scheduling. The Katalon Studio Enterprise to actually create the test cases, test ops to actually receive all the test results and orchestrate the test runs, and then Test Cloud or KRE to actually execute it remotely into another environment.
Awesome. We had some clarity on that integration question. They were asking about Azure DevOps bug system, integrating that through test ops.
So we do have some integrations with Azure DevOps. Those integrations would be obviously through the CI/CD pipeline, as well as through the test plan. So with the test plan, you'll be able to get all the information from the test results and see that being fed into the test plan module inside of Azure DevOps.
And Swati, I see your question about kind of asking about licenses and kind of understanding how mobile fits with that. So you would contract separately for Katalon and Kobiton. So Kobiton, you would need a subscription to call those devices. However, if you already have a contract with Katalon, they are able to resell Kobiton and vice versa. So if you have a contract with Kobiton, we can resell Katalon as well. So super easy to kind of sign up for both services.
And just a little refresher, I'm just going to enact this poll for you guys. If you guys can just answer these 3 simple questions, that would be much appreciated. Again, curious on seeing what you guys are going to give as answers.
Excellent. Yeah, and any questions that we don't get to, if more come through, we'll be sure to follow up afterwards as well. I know both us and the Katalon team are eager to reach out to you guys and help your testing journey get better. So I'll turn it over to Chris and Brad to wrap this up.
Awesome. So we're gonna just simply, let the poll run for a little bit longer. Brad, do you have any closing remarks while we wait for the results?
Yeah, I think, I've said it a couple times here, and I think a lot of people will agree that mobile's hard. And obviously with our approach with Katalon, we're making it much simpler on everybody. Again, the authoring and kind of keeping that UI in Katalon and being able to see those real devices and interacting with real devices versus simulators and emulators is really going to be effective and increase not only your test coverage, but really your efficiency. So the one platform approach is really what I'd like for most to take away from here. And then obviously if there's, if you have questions, if you just want to reach out and talk to me, I've been in the industry for quite a long time at this point. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm always open for a chat.
All right. Thanks so much. Again, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to, learn a little bit more about what Kobiton and Katalon, as a team, but also as individual products can offer you guys. If you have any questions, it seems like, based off the results that I'm seeing here, quite a lot of you guys are interested in both of the solutions. Please feel free to contact us either to your local sales representative or account executive. Or simply give us your email address in the chat, and we'll be able to provide you guys some kind of additional information and get you in contact with the proper individuals. Thank you so much for learning about us and taking the time so that later on we can learn a little bit more about you guys, a little bit more personal. All right. It seems like the polls are a little bit still going on a little bit later on. It seems like we got a little bit more than half of them answered. So, for the last few stragglers, no stress, but if you can, that'd be greatly appreciated. Have a great day, guys. I'll let this run so that the people can finish with the poll answers, but I look forward to talking to you guys in the future, in future webinars, as well as, future opportunities with each other. Take care.